The California sun cast a golden glow over the manicured lawns of Beverly Hills, its warmth a stark contrast to the cold heart beating within the walls of the Parker mansion. Jason Parker stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his study, gazing out at the perfectly landscaped gardens below. His reflection stared back at him, a man in his late 30s, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salaries. His dark hair was styled without a strand out of place, and his steel-gray eyes held a sharpness that had intimidated countless business rivals. To the outside world, Jason Parker was the epitome of success. A self-made millionaire with a business empire that spanned continents, he had climbed to the top through sheer determination and ruthless ambition. But as he stood there, surveying his domain, Jason felt an emptiness that all his wealth couldn't fill. The sound of heels clicking on marble floors echoed through the hallway, growing louder as they approached. Jason didn't turn around. He knew who it was. The door opened, and Emily's reflection appeared in the window beside his own. "Jason?" Her voice was soft, tinged with a hint of uncertainty. "The wedding planner is here. She wants to go over some final details for tomorrow." He turned then, taking in the sight of his fiancée. Emily was undeniably beautiful, with long blonde hair that fell in gentle waves past her shoulders and bright blue eyes that seemed to sparkle even in the dim light of the study. Her hand rested protectively over the slight swell of her stomach, where their child was growing. "I'll be there in a moment," Jason replied, his tone neutral, devoid of the excitement one might expect from a man about to marry the mother of his child. Emily lingered for a moment, as if hoping for more, a smile perhaps, or a touch of affection. When none came, she nodded and left, closing the door behind her with a soft click that seemed to echo in the emptiness of Jason's heart. As soon as she was gone, Jason's hand moved to his pocket, fingers brushing against the sleek surface of his phone. He pulled it out, unlocking it to reveal a string of text messages from Vanessa. His pulse quickened as he read through them, each one a tempting whisper of the wild, carefree life she represented. Vanessa was everything Emily wasn't: unpredictable, passionate, with a zest for life that both thrilled and terrified Jason. Where Emily represented stability and the promise of family, Vanessa was the embodiment of freedom and adventure. And tomorrow, on what was supposed to be the happiest day of his life, Jason found himself torn between these two worlds. He closed his eyes, trying to conjure up the feeling he thought he should have: love, excitement, anticipation. But all he felt was a gnawing sense of doubt. Was this really what he wanted? A life mapped out with military precision, each step carefully calculated to maintain the image of perfection he had cultivated for so long? The buzzing of his phone jolted him from his thoughts. Another message from Vanessa. "Last chance, lover boy. You know where to find me if you want to ditch the white picket fence fantasy." Jason's finger hovered over the reply button, his mind racing with possibilities. He could end it all now, call off the wedding, and run away with Vanessa. The scandal would be enormous, of course, but hadn't he always prided himself on not caring what others thought? But then he thought of Emily, of the child she carried. He thought of the guests who would be arriving soon, of the extravagant wedding that had been planned down to the last detail. He thought of his carefully constructed image, the respect he commanded in the business world. Could he really throw all of that away? With a frustrated growl, Jason shoved the phone back into his pocket. He straightened his tie, smoothed down his already impeccable suit, and schooled his features into a mask of calm confidence. It was time to play the role of the devoted fiancé, the soon-to-be family man. He had made his choice, hadn't he? This was the life he had chosen. As he left the study and made his way to where Emily and the wedding planner waited, Jason pushed thoughts of Vanessa to the back of his mind. He would go through with the wedding. He would be the husband Emily deserved, the father his child needed. He would embrace this life of carefully orchestrated perfection. But even as he smiled and nodded his way through discussions of flower arrangements and seating charts, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that perhaps perfection wasn't all it was cracked up to be. And as the sun began to set on the eve of his wedding day, Jason Parker couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the edge of a precipice, about to take a leap that would change everything, for better or for worse. The night before his wedding, Jason found sleep elusive. He tossed and turned in his king-sized bed, the silken sheets offering no comfort to his troubled mind. Emily slept peacefully beside him, her gentle breathing a stark contrast to the chaos raging within him. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the curtains, Jason gave up on sleep altogether. He slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb Emily, and made his way to the balcony overlooking the sprawling city below. Los Angeles was just beginning to stir, the faint hum of early morning traffic rising up from the streets. Jason leaned against the railing, the cool metal grounding him as his thoughts threatened to spiral out of control. In just a few hours, he would be standing at the altar, promising his life to Emily. It should have been a moment of joy, of anticipation. Instead, all Jason felt was a suffocating sense of panic. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from Vanessa. "I'm in town. One word from you and I'll be there. We could be halfway to Vegas before anyone notices you're gone." Jason's heart raced as he read the message. The temptation was almost overwhelming. He could picture it so clearly, the thrill of escape, the freedom of the open road, Vanessa's laughter as they left everything behind. But then he thought of Emily, sleeping peacefully in their bed. He thought of their unborn child, of the life they had planned together. Could he really abandon all of that for a wild impulse? As the sun rose higher in the sky, bathing the city in a golden glow, Jason made his decision. He would go through with the wedding. He would be the man everyone expected him to be, successful, dependable, the perfect husband and father. With a deep breath, he deleted Vanessa's message and turned back to the bedroom. It was time to get ready for the biggest day of his life. The wedding venue was a vision of elegance and opulence. Hundreds of guests milled about on the perfectly manicured lawn of the oceanfront estate, their excited chatter mixing with the gentle sound of waves crashing against the nearby shore. Jason stood at the altar, outwardly the picture of calm confidence. But inside, he was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. His eyes scanned the crowd, half expecting, half hoping, to see Vanessa's face among the sea of guests. As the music swelled and Emily began her walk down the aisle, a hush fell over the assembled crowd. She was radiant, her white gown hugging her curves and accentuating the gentle swell of her stomach. Her face glowed with happiness and love as she approached Jason. But as Emily drew closer, Jason felt his heart sink. He looked into her eyes, searching for the spark, the connection that he knew should be there. Instead, all he saw was his own reflection, a man playing a part, going through the motions of a life he wasn't sure he wanted. The officiant began to speak, his words about love and commitment washing over Jason without really registering. All he could focus on was the growing sense of panic in his chest, the feeling that he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Just as they were about to exchange vows, Jason's phone buzzed in his pocket. Without thinking, he pulled it out, ignoring the confused and slightly annoyed look on Emily's face. It was another message from Vanessa. "I'm outside. Last chance, Jason. Are you really going to give up on us?" In that moment, everything seemed to crystallize for Jason. The facade he had been maintaining for so long cracked, and he knew he couldn't go through with it. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't do this." A collective gasp rose from the assembled guests as Jason turned and walked away from the altar, leaving a stunned and devastated Emily behind. He could hear the murmurs of shock and disapproval, could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on him as he strode down the aisle and out of the venue. Vanessa was waiting for him just beyond the gates, leaning against a sleek sports car with a triumphant smile on her face. Without a word, Jason climbed into the passenger seat and they sped away, leaving behind the shattered remains of the life he had almost committed to. As the coastline receded in the rearview mirror, Jason felt a mix of exhilaration and gut-wrenching guilt. He had just upended his entire life, hurt the woman carrying his child, and scandalized his family and friends. But beneath the turmoil, there was a sense of relief, a feeling that he had narrowly escaped a life that would have slowly suffocated him. Vanessa's laughter filled the car as they raced down the highway, her hand finding his as she shot him a mischievous grin. "I knew you'd make the right choice," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Jason managed a small smile in return, but as the adrenaline of the moment began to fade, he couldn't help but wonder if he had indeed made the right choice, or if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Back at the wedding venue, chaos reigned. Emily stood at the altar, her white dress a cruel mockery of the happiness she had felt just moments ago. Tears streamed down her face as she struggled to comprehend what had just happened. Olivia, Emily's sister and maid of honor, rushed to her side, wrapping her arms around her trembling form. "Oh, Em," she whispered, her own voice choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry." The guests were in an uproar, their shocked exclamations filling the air. Phones were out, undoubtedly spreading the news of Jason Parker's dramatic exit across social media. In a matter of minutes, what should have been the happiest day of Emily's life had turned into a public spectacle. As Emily's parents tried to usher her away from the prying eyes of the guests, she caught sight of Jason's mother. The older woman's face was a mask of fury and embarrassment, her eyes meeting Emily's with a mix of pity and something that looked unsettlingly like blame. Emily felt her knees buckle, the weight of the moment finally overwhelming her. As she sank to the ground, her white dress pooling around her, she placed a protective hand over her stomach. In that moment, she made a silent promise to her unborn child. No matter what happened, no matter how much pain she was in, she would be strong for them both. As the sun set on what should have been the first day of their married life together, Emily found herself alone in the bridal suite, surrounded by the remnants of her shattered dreams. The room was filled with flowers and gifts, painful reminders of the celebration that would never happen. Olivia sat beside her on the bed, gently stroking her hair as Emily stared blankly at the wall. "What am I going to do, Liv?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. "You're going to get through this," Olivia said firmly. "You're the strongest person I know, Em, and you're not alone. I'm here. Mom and Dad are here. We're all going to help you through this." Emily nodded, trying to draw strength from her sister's words. But as she placed her hand on her stomach, feeling the slight movement of the life growing within her, she couldn't help but wonder what the future held for her and her child. As night fell, the media frenzy was already in full swing. News of Jason Parker's dramatic wedding exit was spreading like wildfire. Headlines screamed across news sites and social media. "Millionaire groom leaves pregnant bride at the altar." Jason Parker's wedding day scandal, a love triangle exposed. From rags to riches to runaway groom, the Jason Parker story. In the coming days, every detail of Jason and Emily's relationship would be dissected and analyzed. Paparazzi would camp outside Emily's home, hoping to catch a glimpse of the jilted bride. Jason's business associates would distance themselves, wary of being associated with such a public scandal. But for now, as the stars came out over Los Angeles, two lives that had once been intertwined were now on drastically different paths. Emily, surrounded by her loving family, began the painful process of piecing her life back together. And Jason, racing down the coast with Vanessa, embraced the intoxicating freedom of his impulsive decision. Neither of them could have imagined the twists and turns that lay ahead, or the ways in which their lives would continue to intersect. For now, they were adrift in the aftermath of a single, life-altering moment, a moment that would reshape not just their own futures, but the lives of everyone around them. The story of Jason Parker and Emily was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. As the first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Jason Parker found himself in a world he barely recognized. The sleek sports car with Vanessa at the wheel sped down the coastal highway, each mile taking him further from the life he had known and deeper into uncharted territory. Vanessa's laughter, once so intoxicating, now seemed hollow to Jason's ears. The thrill of escape that had propelled him through the night was fading, replaced by a gnawing sense of uncertainty. He stared out the window, watching as the familiar landscape of Los Angeles gave way to unfamiliar terrain. "Where are we going?" he asked, his voice hoarse from a night of silence and internal turmoil. Vanessa flashed him a mischievous grin, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Does it matter? We're free, Jason. The world is our oyster. We can go anywhere, do anything. Isn't that what you wanted?" Jason nodded mechanically, but the words rang false in his ears. Was this really what he had wanted? The memory of Emily's face, shocked and devastated, flashed through his mind. He thought of their unborn child, of the future he had thrown away in a moment of impulsive rebellion. As if sensing his unease, Vanessa reached over and squeezed his hand. "Hey, don't go getting cold feet on me now. You made the right choice, Jason. That life, that wedding, it wasn't you. This is the real you, the one who takes risks, who lives life on his own terms." Jason tried to smile, to recapture the feeling of exhilaration that had propelled him away from the altar. But as the miles stretched on and the reality of his decision began to sink in, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had made a terrible mistake. Meanwhile, back in Los Angeles, Emily woke to a world shattered beyond recognition. For a blissful moment, as consciousness slowly returned, she forgot the events of the previous day. She reached out, expecting to find Jason beside her, only to be met with cold, empty sheets. Reality crashed over her like a tidal wave, bringing with it a fresh wave of pain and humiliation. She curled into herself, one hand protectively cradling her stomach, as sobs racked her body. A soft knock at the door interrupted her grief. "Em?" Olivia's voice was gentle, tentative. "Can I come in?" Emily couldn't find her voice to respond, but Olivia entered anyway, crossing the room to sit on the edge of the bed. She placed a comforting hand on Emily's shoulder, her touch a lifeline in the storm of emotions. "I brought you some tea," Olivia said softly. "And, I hate to say this, but you might want to see this." She held out her phone, open to a news website. The headline screamed up at Emily: "Millionaire groom, Jason Parker, spotted with mystery woman hours after jilting pregnant bride." Emily felt her stomach lurch. She pushed the phone away, unable to bear the sight of Jason's face, of the woman, Vanessa, she presumed, by his side. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't look at that." Olivia set the phone aside, pulling her sister into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry, Em. I know it hurts, but you're not alone in this. We're all here for you." As Emily clung to her sister, she felt a flutter of movement in her belly. Her child, Jason's child, reminding her of its presence. In that moment, something shifted within Emily. The pain was still there, raw and all-consuming, but alongside it, a spark of determination ignited. "I have to be strong," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For the baby. I can't let Jason's actions define our future." Olivia nodded, a glimmer of pride shining through her concern. "That's right. You're stronger than this, Em, and you've got all of us behind you." As the day wore on, the media frenzy surrounding Jason's dramatic exit only intensified. Reporters camped outside Emily's family home, their shouts and camera flashes a constant reminder of the public nature of her humiliation. Inside, Emily's parents worked tirelessly to shield her from the chaos. They fielded calls from concerned friends and family, turned away persistent journalists, and tried to create a bubble of calm in the midst of the storm. But Emily knew she couldn't hide forever. Sooner or later she would have to face the world, to reckon with the new reality of her life as a single mother-to-be, abandoned on what should have been the happiest day of her life. As night fell once again, Emily stood at the window of her childhood bedroom, looking out at the sea of reporters below. She placed a hand on her stomach, feeling the gentle movements of her child. "It's just you and me now, little one," she whispered. "But we're going to be okay. I promise." In that moment, as tears streamed down her face, Emily made a silent vow. She would not let Jason's betrayal break her. She would rise above this, stronger and more resilient than ever before. For herself and for her child, she would build a new life, one filled with love, strength, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. Across the city, in a luxurious penthouse apartment, Jason Parker was coming to terms with the consequences of his actions. The initial rush of freedom had faded, replaced by a creeping sense of guilt and regret. Vanessa lounged on the balcony, sipping champagne and reveling in their scandalous escape. But Jason found he couldn't join in her celebration. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages from angry friends, disappointed family members, and business associates distancing themselves from the scandal. As he scrolled through the barrage of notifications, one message caught his eye. It was from Olivia, Emily's sister. "I hope you're happy with yourself, Jason. Emily is devastated. If you have any shred of decency left, you'll take responsibility for your child. They deserve better than a coward for a father." The words hit Jason like a physical blow. In the whirlwind of his impulsive decision, he had almost forgotten about the child, his child, growing inside Emily. The reality of what he had done, of the lives he had upended, came crashing down on him. He stepped out onto the balcony, the cool night air doing little to calm the turmoil in his mind. Vanessa looked up at him, her smile fading as she saw the distress on his face. "What's wrong, lover?" she asked, reaching for his hand. "Aren't you happy? We're finally free to be together." Jason pulled away from her touch, suddenly unable to bear the sight of her. In that moment, he saw Vanessa for what she truly was. Not the embodiment of freedom and passion he had imagined, but a selfish, reckless force that had lured him away from everything that truly mattered. "This was a mistake," he said, his voice hollow. "All of it. I never should have left Emily. I never should have agreed to run away with you." Vanessa's eyes flashed with anger. "Are you serious? After everything we've been through, you're having second thoughts now? Don't tell me you're thinking of crawling back to her." But Jason wasn't listening. His mind was racing, trying to figure out how he could possibly make things right. Could he go back? Would Emily ever forgive him? And even if she did, how could he face his child, knowing he had abandoned them before they were even born? As Vanessa's angry words washed over him, Jason realized that the life he had imagined with her was nothing but an illusion. The freedom he had sought was a mirage, and in chasing it, he had lost everything that truly mattered. In the days that followed, Jason's world continued to unravel. His impulsive decision had far-reaching consequences that he had never anticipated. The business empire he had built with such care began to crumble as investors and partners distanced themselves from the scandal. His phone rang constantly, but now it was reporters seeking comment, lawyers warning of potential lawsuits, and associates pulling out of deals. The man who had once commanded respect and admiration in boardrooms across the country now found himself a pariah, his name synonymous with betrayal and irresponsibility. Vanessa, sensing the shift in Jason's demeanor and the precariousness of their situation, became increasingly volatile. Her carefree attitude gave way to fits of anger and accusation. She demanded expensive gifts, lavish trips, anything to distract from the reality of their situation. But Jason found he could no longer lose himself in Vanessa's world of hedonism and excess. Every glittering party, every extravagant purchase, only served to remind him of what he had left behind. He thought of Emily, of the quiet evenings they had spent planning their future, of the simple joy he had felt when she told him she was pregnant. One night, as Vanessa slept off another night of wild partying, Jason stood on the balcony of their hotel suite, looking out over the glittering city below. He pulled out his phone, his finger hovering over Emily's number. He had called countless times in the weeks since the wedding, but she had never answered. This time, driven by a mixture of desperation and determination, he didn't call. Instead, he began to type out a message. "Emily, I know I have no right to contact you after what I've done, but I need you to know how sorry I am. I made the biggest mistake of my life when I left you at the altar. I was a coward, running away from responsibility, from commitment. But I see now that what I was running from was everything that truly matters in life. I don't expect your forgiveness, but please, if there's any chance at all, let me be a part of our child's life. I want to make things right, to be the father our baby deserves. I'm ready to face the consequences of my actions. Please, give me a chance to prove that I can change." His finger hovered over the send button for what felt like an eternity. Finally, with a deep breath, he pressed it. The message disappeared into the digital ether, carrying with it Jason's last hope for redemption. As he waited for a response that might never come, Jason made a silent vow of his own. Whether Emily gave him another chance or not, he would spend the rest of his life trying to make amends for his mistake. He would rebuild his life, not on the shifting sands of wealth and status, but on the solid foundation of responsibility, integrity, and love. The sun began to rise over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. As Jason watched the start of a new day, he felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time since he had run away from the altar, he felt ready to face it. Meanwhile, across the city, Emily's phone buzzed with the arrival of Jason's message. As she read his words, a storm of emotions washed over her. Anger, hurt, a flicker of hope, quickly extinguished by the memory of his betrayal. Her hand moved to her growing belly, feeling the strong kicks of the child within. With a deep breath, Emily made her decision. She wouldn't respond to Jason's message. Not yet. She needed time to heal, to find her own strength. But as she felt another kick from her baby, she knew that someday, for the sake of their child, she would have to find a way to forgive Jason. Not for his sake, but for the future of the innocent life they had created together. As the city awakened to a new day, two lives that had once been intertwined now stood at a crossroads. Jason, seeking redemption for his greatest mistake. Emily, finding strength in the face of betrayal. And between them, an unborn child, unaware of the turmoil surrounding its impending arrival, but destined to be the bridge that might one day reunite its fractured family. The story of Jason, Emily, and their child was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning to unfold in ways none of them could have ever imagined. The weeks following Jason's impulsive text message to Emily were a blur of sleepless nights and anxiety-filled days. Each time his phone buzzed, his heart would leap, hoping it was her response. But as days turned into weeks with no word from Emily, hope began to fade, replaced by a gnawing sense of despair. Jason's life, once a carefully constructed facade of success and control, had crumbled around him. His business associates, once eager to be in his good graces, now avoided his calls. The media, which had once lauded him as a self-made millionaire, now painted him as a callous playboy who had abandoned his pregnant fiancée for a fling with a model. Vanessa, sensing the shift in Jason's demeanor and the precariousness of their situation, had become increasingly erratic. Her demands for attention and extravagance grew more insistent, her temper more volatile. The carefree spirit that had once drawn Jason to her now seemed childish and selfish in the harsh light of reality. One morning, as Jason sat at the kitchen table, mindlessly scrolling through another series of scathing news articles about himself, Vanessa stormed in, her face a mask of fury. "Is this all you're going to do?" she demanded, slamming her hand on the table. "Sit around and mope? Where's the Jason Parker I fell for? The man who took risks, who lived life on the edge?" Jason looked up at her, really seeing her for the first time in weeks. The glamorous facade had faded, revealing a woman as lost and desperate as he was. In that moment, he realized that their relationship had been built on nothing more than mutual escapism, a shared desire to run from responsibility and consequences. "I'm sorry, Vanessa," he said quietly. "But that man doesn't exist anymore. He never really did. It was all an illusion, and it's time I faced reality." Vanessa's eyes widened, a mix of shock and fear crossing her face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying it's over," Jason replied, surprised at the calm in his own voice. "This, whatever this was between us, it's not real, and it's not right. I need to try to make amends for what I've done, to take responsibility for my actions." Vanessa's face contorted with rage. "You bastard! After everything we've been through, you're just going to throw me away? Crawl back to your precious Emily?" Jason shook his head. "No, Vanessa. I'm not crawling back to anyone. I'm standing up and facing the consequences of my choices. Something I should have done a long time ago." As Vanessa's angry tirade washed over him, Jason felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. He had finally spoken his truth, taken the first step towards redemption. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in months, he felt ready to face it. Across the city, Emily's life had taken on a rhythm of its own. Her days were filled with prenatal appointments, work at the community center where she volunteered, and quiet evenings with her family. The pain of Jason's betrayal was still there, a dull ache that never quite went away. but it no longer consumed her every waking moment. Emily had thrown herself into preparing for the arrival of her child. She had transformed the spare room in her sister's apartment into a cozy nursery, painted in soft shades of green and yellow. Each item she carefully selected for her baby, from the wooden crib to the stuffed animals that lined the shelves, was a testament to her love and commitment to the life growing inside her. One evening, as Emily sat in the rocking chair by the window, her hand resting on her now prominent belly, Olivia entered the room. "Hey, Em," she said softly, leaning against the doorframe. "How are you feeling?" Emily smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. "I'm good, Liv. Really good, actually. The baby's been kicking up a storm today." Olivia crossed the room, kneeling beside her sister and placing a gentle hand on Emily's stomach. As if on cue, the baby kicked, eliciting a laugh from both women. "That's one strong little munchkin you've got in there," Olivia grinned. Her expression softened as she looked up at Emily. "You know, I'm so proud of you, Em. The way you've handled everything. You're amazing." Emily's eyes welled with tears, but they were tears of gratitude, not sadness. "I couldn't have done it without you, Liv. Without all of you. Your support, it's meant everything." The sisters sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both lost in thought. Finally, Olivia spoke again, her voice hesitant. I know this might not be what you want to hear, but have you thought any more about Jason's message?" Emily tensed slightly, her hand instinctively tightening on her belly. Jason's text message, sent weeks ago, had been a source of turmoil for her. Part of her wanted to delete it, to erase this last connection to the man who had hurt her so deeply. But another part, the part that remembered the good times, the love they had shared, couldn't let it go. "I think about it every day," Emily admitted quietly. I don't know what to do, Liv. Part of me wants to give him a chance, for the baby's sake. But another part, I'm scared. Scared of being hurt again. Scared of letting him back into our lives only to have him leave again." Olivia nodded, understanding in her eyes. "That's completely valid, Em. You have every right to be cautious. But maybe it's worth considering. Not for Jason's sake, but for the baby. And for you. Closure, if nothing else." Emily sighed, her gaze drifting to the window, to the city beyond. Somewhere out there was Jason, the father of her child, the man who had both loved her and betrayed her. Could she find it in her heart to forgive him, to allow him a place in their child's life? "I'll think about it," she said finally. "But not yet. Right now, I need to focus on me and the baby. Everything else, it can wait." Olivia squeezed her hand supportively. "Whatever you decide, we're all behind you, 100%. As night fell over the city, two souls wrestled with the weight of their choices and the uncertainty of their futures. Jason, alone in his penthouse, embarking on a journey of self-reflection and atonement. Emily, surrounded by love and support, finding strength in her impending motherhood. And between them, growing stronger each day, the child that connected them. A new life, unaware of the complex web of emotions and circumstances surrounding its existence, but destined to be the catalyst for healing, forgiveness, and perhaps someday, reconciliation. The story of Jason, Emily, and their unborn child continued to unfold, each day bringing new challenges, new opportunities for growth, and the possibility of a future none of them could have imagined in the aftermath of that fateful wedding day. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Jason found himself standing in front of a modest building in a part of town he had never frequented before. The sign above the door read, "New Beginnings Rehabilitation Center." His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the door handle, but he steeled himself and stepped inside. The reception area was simple but welcoming, a far cry from the opulent offices he was used to. A kind-faced woman looked up from the desk, offering a gentle smile. "Can I help you?" Jason took a deep breath. "My name is Jason Parker. I'm here for the outpatient program, for alcohol dependency and to work on myself." The words felt foreign in his mouth. Jason Parker, admitting weakness, seeking help. But as the receptionist nodded and began to explain the program, Jason felt a weight lift from his shoulders. This was the first step on a long road, but it was a step in the right direction. Over the next few weeks, Jason threw himself into the program with the same intensity he had once applied to his business dealings. Group therapy sessions, one-on-one counseling, workshops on emotional intelligence and healthy coping mechanisms, he approached each with a determination born of desperation and hope. Slowly, painfully, Jason began to confront the truth about himself. The drive for success that had propelled him to the top of the business world had also been his downfall. He had used wealth and status as a shield, a way to avoid dealing with his own insecurities and fears of intimacy. In one particularly grueling therapy session, Jason found himself opening up about his relationship with his own father, a cold, distant man who had valued achievement above all else. "I spent my whole life trying to prove myself to him," Jason admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "And in the process, I became just like him. I pushed away the people who truly cared about me, all for the sake of some twisted idea of success." As Jason worked on himself, he also began to make amends where he could. He reached out to former employees he had treated poorly, apologizing and offering to help them in their careers. He donated to charities supporting single mothers and children in need, thinking of Emily and their unborn child with each contribution. But Emily herself remained out of reach. Jason respected her silence, understanding that she needed time and space. Still, not a day went by that he didn't think of her, of the child they had created together. He kept a sonogram picture, sent reluctantly by Olivia after much pleading, on his nightstand, a constant reminder of what he had lost and what he was fighting to regain. Meanwhile, Emily's pregnancy progressed, her body changing as the new life within her grew stronger each day. She had thrown herself into preparing for motherhood with the same determination she had once applied to planning her wedding. LeMay's classes, parenting books, endless discussions with her doctor. Emily approached it all with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The nursery in her new apartment, she had moved out of Olivia's place, needing a space of her own, was a testament to her readiness, every detail carefully chosen with love. But in quiet moments, when the busyness of the day faded and she was left alone with her thoughts, Emily couldn't help but think of Jason. His text message, now months old, still sat in her phone unanswered. She had memorized every word, could recite it in her sleep. One evening, as she sat in the nursery, folding tiny onesies and arranging them in the dresser, Emily felt a particularly strong kick from the baby. She paused, placing her hand on her swollen belly. "You're quite the little acrobat, aren't you?" she murmured, a smile playing on her lips. As she felt another kick, a thought struck her with sudden clarity. This child, half her and half Jason, deserved to know both its parents. Whatever her feelings towards Jason, could she really deny her child the chance to know its father? With trembling hands, Emily reached for her phone. She pulled up Jason's message, reading it once more. Then, taking a deep breath, she began to type, "Jason, I've thought long and hard about your message. I won't pretend that what you did didn't hurt me deeply. It will take time for me to trust you again, if I ever can. But this isn't just about us anymore. Our child deserves to know both its parents. If you're serious about wanting to be involved, about making amends, then we need to talk. Not for us, but for the baby. Let me know when you're ready." Emily's finger hovered over the send button, her heart racing. Was she making the right decision? Could she really open herself up to the possibility of being hurt again? But as she felt another kick from the baby, she knew her decision was made. With a deep breath, she pressed send. Across the city, Jason's phone buzzed with a notification. As he read Emily's message, his heart pounding in his chest, he felt a surge of emotion. Hope, fear, gratitude, determination. This was his chance, perhaps his last chance, to make things right. With shaking hands, he typed out a reply. "Thank you, Emily. I understand the hurt I've caused, and I'm committed to earning back your trust, no matter how long it takes. I've been working on myself, trying to become the man our child deserves as a father. I'm ready to talk whenever you are. Just name the time and place." As night fell over the city, two souls stood at the precipice of a new chapter. Jason, on a path of redemption, fighting to become the man he should have been all along. Emily, finding strength in her impending motherhood, opening herself to the possibility of healing and forgiveness. And between them, growing stronger each day, the child that would bind them together forever. A new life, full of potential and promise, unaware of the complex journey that had led to this moment, but destined to be the catalyst for a future none of them could have imagined. The story of Jason, Emily, and their unborn child was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning to unfold in ways that would test their strength, challenge their perceptions, and ultimately, perhaps, lead them to a place of understanding and reconciliation. As the city slept, two phones lit up with messages exchanged, two hearts beat with anticipation and trepidation, and one tiny life continued to grow, blissfully unaware of the momentous changes its existence had set in motion. The dawn of a new day approached, bringing with it the promise of new beginnings, second chances, and the enduring power of love, not just romantic love, but the unconditional love of a parent for their child. In this love, Jason and Emily would find the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together or apart, united in their commitment to the new life they had created. The cafe was bustling with the mid-morning crowd when Emily arrived, her heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. She scanned the room, her hand unconsciously resting on her swollen belly until she spotted him. Jason sat in a corner booth, his once confident posture now hunched and uncertain. As Emily approached, Jason stood quickly, nearly knocking over his untouched coffee. "Emily," he breathed, his eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. "Thank you for coming." Emily nodded, lowering herself carefully into the booth. An awkward silence fell between them, years of shared history and recent pain hanging in the air. Finally, Jason spoke, his voice quiet and strained. "Emily, I don't even know where to begin. I'm sorry seems so inadequate." Emily met his gaze, her eyes filled with a complex mix of emotions. "You're right, it is inadequate, but it's a start." Over the next hour, they talked. Jason explained his journey through therapy, his realization of the deep-seated issues that had led to his destructive behavior. Emily shared her experiences preparing for the baby, the support she'd received from family and friends. As they spoke, the tension slowly began to ease. They weren't the same people they had been on that fateful wedding day. Both had been changed by their experiences, grown in ways they never expected. "I want to be part of our child's life," Jason said earnestly. "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but please, give me a chance to be the father our baby deserves." Emily was quiet for a long moment, her hand absently tracing circles on her belly. Finally, she spoke. "I can't forgive you yet, Jason. That will take time if it happens at all, but our child deserves to know both its parents. We can start there." As they left the cafe, plans made for future meetings and discussions, both felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the sake of their child, they were willing to try. The hospital corridor echoed with the sound of urgent footsteps and Emily's labored breathing. Jason, who had been called as soon as Emily went into labor, rushed alongside the gurney, his face a mask of concern and excitement. "You're doing great, Em," he encouraged, using the old nickname without thinking. Emily, in too much pain to correct him, merely nodded, gripping his hand tightly as another contraction hit. The next few hours were a blur of medical jargon, encouragement from doctors and nurses, and Emily's determined efforts. Jason remained by her side throughout, offering support and words of encouragement, marveling at her strength. Finally, with one last heroic push, their child entered the world, the room filled with the strong, healthy cries of a newborn. "It's a boy," the doctor announced, placing the squirming bundle on Emily's chest. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she gazed at her son. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I'm your mommy." Jason stood frozen, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. This tiny being, this perfect mixture of him and Emily, was his son. Hesitantly, he reached out, gently touching the baby's hand. Tiny fingers instinctively wrapped around his, and Jason felt his heart expand with a love he had never known before. "He's beautiful," Jason murmured, his voice choked with emotion. "Emily, he's perfect." Emily looked up at Jason, seeing the awe and love in his eyes. For a moment, the pain of the past faded, replaced by the shared joy of new life. "What should we name him?" Jason asked softly. Emily smiled, tired but radiant. "I was thinking, Matthew. It means gift from God." Jason nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Matthew, their son, their gift. As the nurses took Matthew for his first checkup, Jason and Emily shared a look of understanding. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, united by their love for this tiny miracle. The first few months of Matthew's life were a whirlwind of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and countless moments of joy and frustration. Jason and Emily, still living separately, worked to establish a co-parenting routine that put their son's needs first. Jason threw himself into fatherhood with the same determination he had once applied to his business dealings. He read every parenting book he could find, attended classes on infant care, and made sure his home was fully equipped for Matthew's visits. Emily, while appreciative of Jason's efforts, struggled with the complex emotions that came with sharing her son. Every time Matthew left for his time with Jason, she felt a pang of loss, even as she recognized the importance of their son having both parents in his life. One evening, as Jason was dropping Matthew off after a weekend visit, he noticed Emily's tired, stressed expression. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Emily sighed, running a hand through her disheveled hair. "I'm fine. It's hard, balancing everything." Jason nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. I could help more, if you'd let me." Emily looked at him skeptically. "How?" "I could come over sometimes, help with Matthew even when it's not my time. Give you a break, a chance to rest, or just have some time to yourself." Emily hesitated, old fears and doubts surfacing. But as she looked at Jason, she saw only sincerity in his eyes. Slowly, she nodded. "Okay, we can try that." Over the next few weeks, Jason became a more constant presence in their lives. He would come over in the evenings, giving Emily a chance to take a long bath or catch up on sleep while he played with Matthew or tackled the never-ending pile of laundry. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the atmosphere between them began to change. The tension that had marked their interactions since the failed wedding began to ease, replaced by a cautious friendship built on their shared love for their son. One night, as Jason was preparing to leave after putting Matthew to bed, Emily stopped him. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything, for being there for Matthew, and for me." Jason smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "Thank you for giving me the chance." As he left, both felt a subtle shift in their relationship. The road ahead was still long and uncertain, but for the first time they both felt hope for the future. Not just for Matthew, but for themselves as well. As Matthew's first birthday approached, Jason and Emily found themselves working together to plan a small celebration. The past year had been a journey of growth, challenges, and unexpected joys for both of them. Jason had continued his therapy, working tirelessly to address the issues that had led to his destructive behavior. He had rebuilt his business, this time with a focus on ethical practices and giving back to the community. The Jason Parker who had run from responsibility was gone, replaced by a man dedicated to being the best father and person he could be. Emily had flourished in her role as a mother, finding strength she never knew she possessed. She had returned to work part-time at a non-profit organization, balancing her career with motherhood. The pain of Jason's betrayal had faded, replaced by a cautious respect for the man he was becoming. The day of Matthew's birthday dawned bright and clear. Jason arrived early to help with preparations, and soon the small apartment was filled with the sound of laughter as they worked together, Matthew crawling around their feet, babbling happily. As Emily struggled to hang a banner, Jason stepped in to help. Their hands brushed, and for a moment they both froze, a spark of the old connection flaring between them. I've been thinking, Jason said softly, his eyes meeting Emily's, about us, about our family. Emily's heart raced, a mix of hope and fear coursing through her. What about us? Jason took a deep breath. I know I hurt you, Emily. I know I destroyed the trust between us. But this past year, watching you with Matthew, working together to raise him, I've fallen in love with you all over again. Not the old selfish love, but something deeper, something real. Emily stood silent, her emotions a whirlwind. Jason continued, his voice earnest. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know. Whatever happens between us, I'm committed to being the best co-parent I can be for Matthew. Before Emily could respond, the doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of the first guests. The moment passed, but Emily found her mind returning to Jason's words throughout the party. As the last guest left and Matthew slept peacefully in his crib, exhausted from the excitement, Emily and Jason found themselves alone. The apartment was a mess of wrapping paper and cake crumbs, but neither seemed to notice. Did you mean what you said earlier? Emily asked quietly. Jason nodded, his expression serious. Every word. Emily took a deep breath, her heart pounding. I can't pretend the past didn't happen, Jason. You hurt me deeply. I know, Jason said, his voice filled with regret. And I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it if you'll let me. Emily was quiet for a long moment, her eyes searching Jason's face. Finally, she spoke. I'm not ready to jump back into a relationship. There's still a lot of healing to be done. But I'm open to the possibility of us someday. Jason's face lit up with hope. That's more than I could have asked for. As they began to clean up the remnants of the party, a comfortable silence fell between them. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, not yet. There were still hurts to heal, trust to rebuild. But as they worked side by side, stealing glances at each other and sharing small smiles, both felt a sense of possibility. In the nursery, Matthew slept on, unaware of the momentous shift taking place between his parents. His very existence had been the catalyst for change, the force that had pushed Jason to become a better man, and had given Emily the strength to open her heart again. As the night wore on, Jason and Emily found themselves sitting on the couch, looking through photos of Matthew's first year. Their hands brushed as they reached for the same picture, and this time, neither pulled away. We've come a long way, Emily murmured, her eyes meeting Jason's. Jason nodded, his gaze soft. We have, and we have a long way to go. But I'm ready for the journey if you are. Emily smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. I think I am. As the clock struck midnight, marking the end of Matthew's first birthday, it also marked the beginning of a new chapter for Jason and Emily. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges to face, old wounds to heal, and trust to rebuild. But they were no longer the same people who had stood at that altar a year ago. They had been changed by love, by loss, by the miracle of new life. And as they sat together, planning for Matthew's future and cautiously exploring the possibility of their own, both Jason and Emily realized that sometimes fate's greatest gifts come disguised as our greatest challenges. The story of Jason, Emily, and Matthew was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning, a tale of redemption, forgiveness, and the enduring power of love in all its forms.